call the meeting to order and ask for a motion for executive session for the purpose of discussing 7 particular personnel items. Michelle, and a second, Jen. All in favor? Okay, we are now in executive session and members of the public are excused. I'll call the meeting to order and ask everybody to stand for the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great. Seems funny to say welcome back after February break, but welcome back after February break. I hope everybody got their batteries recharged and that the first day back was successful for everybody. Jamie, I will turn it over to you.
Great, thank you very much. I will share my screen so I can give you our typical update on how things are going, all things COVID related, because that is, as you might guess, a hot topic. So if you could give me a thumbs up that you can see the screen. All right, that was the earlier screen, so I'm going to go on to the next one.
We're good now.
Okay, now we're good. So things have changed pretty significantly since our last report. And if you remember our last report, it was positive news. And I could tell you that that positive news is continuing. And so, but it's changed quite a bit. And so let's just jump right into our numbers. Again, this is student COVID data since really coming out of the holiday break. Where we are today is we have 1 student in isolation. That means 1 student in the entire district, well over 3,000 students has COVID at this time, only 1. We have 12 students in quarantine across the entire district. And so you can see the trends, how they've completely declined. The gray line is the quarantines. That means they may have been exposed or they may have traveled and now have to quarantine. Those are the numbers there. It's a little bit of an uptick. I'll be honest, if you follow the quarantine numbers, it is a little bit of an EKG look to it because all it takes is one event that impacts a large number of people and that number jumps up quickly or can come down if they all come off of quarantine at the same time, which oftentimes they do. So we do have a little bit of an uptick, but 12 is pretty good. When we jump over to staff, we have 0 staff at this time. And this goes back to last week, in fact. We've been at 0 staff with COVID almost for a week now, which is great. And we have 2 staff members in quarantine. That means they may have been exposed to COVID or they traveled and have to quarantine a bit. And people travel for a variety of reasons. I know when I say travel, people sometimes will immediately think, oh, vacation. Well, we also have to remember that people have kids who go to school out of state. We also know that families, there's medical emergencies and medical events or family emergencies that might cause people to go and care for loved ones. And so that does happen on occasion. And so the good news to report is we have 1 out of, if you in total, everybody, staff and students, well over 4,000 people. Right now, knock on wood, it stays that way. We have 1 COVID positive person in the district and 14 total on quarantine. Those numbers haven't been that good since late September. That's really pretty remarkable when you think about what we've been through and where we've been with everything. And so when we break it down, just showing by buildings, the 1 case happens to be in the elementary school and it happens to be a student. Everything else is a 0 right now. So next steps, vaccination progress. Thank you, Deb. I was in the middle of a meeting this afternoon when she sent me an email and said, just so you know, the governor is giving another press conference today, and he just shared that school districts are now required to report vaccinations of staff on a weekly basis. No idea if we're even legally able to do that. No idea how we'll be able to do that or what that mechanism will be. We're being told that further information is forthcoming. But what's happened is, and I'm going to jump around a bit here to number 3, this federal, state, CDC, New York State Department of Health mixed messages. So the CDC released updated guidelines about a week ago now, and we heard our president come out and say, schools need to reopen. They need to reopen now. But when you look at the CDC guidance, it's exactly what we're doing. It says masks and social distancing. It doesn't alleviate the social distancing issue, which is causing districts to not be able to reopen fully. We don't have the space or the staffing to reopen so long as we have to be at 6 feet. And so we've also heard our governor say, schools need to reopen. Infections are low. He just said this a couple days ago. Infections are low. They're not happening in schools. Schools need to reopen. And I think at that point, some folks brought to his attention that the 6-foot issue is still an issue. And we're lucky in Canandaigua in that we've been successful in getting our staff vaccines who want them. Even as close as Monroe County has not been nearly as lucky with that. They have hundreds and thousands of staff to still go. And so he came out today saying, you know, we do want schools to open, but it's reasonable to say that staff, he's saying teachers, but I believe it needs to be staff. All education staff need to be vaccinated if they want it. And so I think that's where his whole requirement for reporting vaccines will be. Our best guess, based on what people are telling us here in Canandaigua, of our 730 staff, we're right around 500 who either have an appointment or have at least had their first vaccine. In fact, we think of that 500, the large majority of them have already had their second vaccine, which is great. You know, we're really positioned fairly positively. The Ontario County Public Health is still working with us. They're giving us vaccination slots. Right now, we're requesting 5 per week. We have 12 people still on our list who say they want a vaccine, but up until this point, when we call them for an appointment, they decline it for a variety of reasons. You know, they have maybe their own medical issues that they're still trying to navigate before they get the vaccine, or they had COVID, but they're not fully over the symptom, and therefore, you know, they have to wait until they are before they get the vaccine. Things like that are preventing them. But we continue to call them each week when we get our 5 slots. My worry is, or not even a worry, I know this to be true. I believe after this week, we're probably not going to have slots reserved for schools anymore. We believe after this week, almost every school in Wayne Finger Lakes will have been able to give vaccination appointments to their staff that want it. And so now public health will change their focus to another group and try to work through other groups that qualify under 1A and 1B. But, you know, we're doing well with our vaccinations, and our numbers, our COVID numbers, maybe that's partly reflective of that. That could be a piece of the data there. Travel and quarantine changes. This is, as the world turns, we're learning more and more about this all the time. CDC did put information forth saying, if you had COVID and you've had it within the last 90 days, you don't need to quarantine if you're exposed to somebody. Or if you travel and come back, you don't need to quarantine. They also said if you've had your second dose and you're between 2 weeks to 90 days out from your second dose, you don't need to quarantine after travel. This was CDC. The New York State Department of Health has been silent on that. They have not issued anything. But to our surprise, Friday night, Ontario County Public Health put on their social media feed that they were agreeing with and following the CDC guidance. So we asked them, and they just said that the New York State Department of Health has kind of been slow on giving direction. And so until they give direction, they're going to follow CDC. We are still trying to gain clarity on that. I had a Zoom session with our county administrator and assistant administrator this morning. Asked them that question. This was news to them. So they were going to work with the Department of Health to try to figure out where does Ontario County stand. But it's my belief if whatever Ontario County adopts, we'll support. You know, it's not something we have the authority to not. Certainly we could be more restrictive, but I don't believe that's in our best interest. We'll support them, but Ontario County also said, they're saying this now, but if New York State comes out and gives different guidance, they'll have to then support the New York State guidance regardless, even if it's different from theirs. So knowing that, you know, spring break is coming up and families do want, and staff may want to travel, they're all saying they don't advise for travel, all the departments of health and CDC. It would be nice to be able to give people factual information so that they can make informed decisions with. But I do worry that right now, according to Ontario County, maybe they could travel and not have to quarantine if they've had their second vaccine and it's 2 weeks to 90 days out, and they book something, a flight or something, and then something changes. And it's a no-win situation. All we can do is share the information we have and tell them that it's subject to change at any time. But this is something we're continuing trying to find clarity around. But right now, there is discrepant information between what CDC is saying and what New York State Department of Health is saying, and Ontario County Public Health seems to be siding with CDC. Item number 4, there certainly is interest for a full reopening. You know, we're hearing it locally, we're seeing it across the state. I've had a lot of email interactions with people in our community, Zoom sessions with people in our community, phone calls, and just helping them understand that really until this 6-foot item is removed, it's really a non-conversation starter because we don't have the space or the staff. We do have a group in the community that's interested in purchasing these dividers, these desktop dividers, so that we could fully reopen. Now, a couple things about that. We did a survey in November about just that and other things, and people did not see that as a favorable option at that time. Times are different, admittedly, but I will also say that the worry about these dividers is, are they truly a barrier? When they're sitting on a desk, for me, I'm an adult, I see over them, you know, and even if I'm a child and I don't see over them, but if I turn sideways to my classmate that's next to me, there's no barrier in between us because it ends at the end of my desk. So is it truly a barrier? You know, these are the things we grapple with, and it's really difficult. But the other piece of it is I won't even go down the road of, is this a barrier or not? It doesn't answer the problem for busing, 1 per seat, unless you're from the same household, and it doesn't answer the problem for lunches, for meals, breakfast and lunch. So beyond just a desk barrier for academics, it doesn't answer many of the other dilemmas we face based on these restrictions and these regulations. We all want fully reopening. You know, we do when it's safe. We have people in our community that are nervous and feeling it's not safe yet. And we have people in our community that are saying, let's go, we're ready, things are good. And so that's the difficulty. No matter what we do, we're gonna have people that are anxious, perhaps even upset with what our decisions are because we have polar opposite beliefs. But, you know, I continue to engage with anybody around these topics and hear them out and explain. And many times we come to a mutual understanding and all of that. And sometimes we don't. And that's disappointing. You know, I certainly would not want it to be that way if I could help it. But anyway, continue to advocate for the governor to relook at the regulations around distancing. I find it hard to believe the governor will change the 6 feet, especially now that CDC just released updated guidance with social distancing in it. If the governor did that, he would be doing it contrary to what the CDC is saying. Performing arts, we continue to advocate really hard for performing arts. All we're asking is 6 feet and masks, make it a little bit more doable. And there had been some really good momentum and attention. I feel like it's quieting down, and that's sad. So just if you get a chance, continue to, if you believe in it, continue to reach out to our local elected officials and let them know that you believe in this too. I know they do. Both Assemblyman Gallahan and Senator Helming both have advocated bills to reduce it to 6 feet. So we thank them for that. Athletics are up and running. Can you believe it? Fall season 2, I think, starts next week or the week after. It's unbelievable when you think about it. But our typical winter sports began, and then the so-called high-risk winter sports began not too long ago as well. They're halfway through their abbreviated season already, and knock on wood, people have been beyond fantastic, just beyond fantastic. Kids are wearing their masks during competition, even wrestling. I'm just really, really impressed with the discipline of everybody trying to make it as safe as possible. And so far, so good, knock on wood, that we can continue that trend. And then survey, just question mark. If things change, you know, do we go back out to the community and say, where are we now? How are we feeling now about things? Help guide our decisions moving forward. I just don't think it's time for a survey at this point. There's just nothing has changed based on the guidance from the governor. But if anything changes, you know, we need to be ready to pivot and put a survey out there. I will be asking our leadership team tomorrow when we meet to just start wrapping their head around, what if we did fully reopen before the school year was out? What would that look like? What would that take to make happen? To the families that have been advocating hard for a full reopening, I have told them, even if the governor says, okay, 6 feet is no more, you know, we don't have to social distance, we're not going to be able to flip the switch tomorrow and reopen. best case scenario is 3 to 4 weeks, because we have to work on a full master schedule revamping, reallocation of staff, not to mention transportation. How do we reroute things, reassign routes potentially even? It is going to take a lot of effort. It's not a simple endeavor. And you really can't get too much of a head start on that, because assuming we can fully reopen at some point this year, we probably would still have to offer a fully virtual option just to get us through this year. Who goes to virtual, who stays virtual, and who doesn't? We're going to have to reassign staff and everything. It will not be easy. It's going to take a lot of time. And so there's just a lot of unknowns, but we'll work really hard to try to prepare and anticipate and make our best estimated guesses so that we can move as quick as possible if it's deemed doable and safe. So that's this week's COVID update. I'm not sure if anybody has any questions or thoughts.
Will you share your screen, please? Thank you. Reactions, questions, thoughts?
Milton.
So I guess that was going to be my question, Jamie. What is it going to take to try to reopen in terms of getting, if the governor did announce, how quickly would it take? I mean, seems to me that it's not going to be an easy undertaking to try to redevelop schedules and get everything back in line. So, I mean, you said 3 weeks. Is that optimistic or is that realistic? What are you thinking?
I would say 3 to 4 weeks is optimistic. Scheduling typically takes a month to 2 months, 2 months, I'll just say, because it does. And that's largely done during a time when staff and students aren't here. So these folks are going to be working on scheduling while staff and students are here. And so trying to do both simultaneously will be very challenging. But I hope it could be done in 3 to 4 weeks. If we had them start at least wrapping their head around what it would look like now, in hopes and anticipation that things might change down the road from the governor's perspective.
Just to follow up on that, as far as we know, the state has abandoned any interest in doing testing, right? So we're not doing Regents testing. So June, which would typically be a month full of Regents testing, is not going to be Regents testing.
They have not taken any of the New York State assessments away yet. So Regents are still on. New York State 3 through 8 assessments are still on. They have submitted a federal waiver to have them off this year. But actually, Matt just received a nice email today preparing us for New York State 3 through 8 assessments because they've not heard back from the federal government yet. So, good question.
Jen?
So when I think about this, and I mentioned some of this in the last board meeting, if we are now allowed to do high-risk sports and we don't have requisite testing that goes along with those high-risk sports to understand if we have asymptomatic positives in that, we aren't really getting a full look at the data of where the transmission may be. I want to say may, because I think we're all learning about whether it could be there or not. It just seems at odds to me that we allow high-risk sports with no testing to occur, but we will not let children sit at desks, doing much less physical activity. I'm not sure if I'm entirely in favor of repopulating the schools back to normal density, but it really doesn't add in my brain. We can have kids wrestling, mass or not, or cheerleading or football or whatever, all those high-risk sports without the testing to go with it. And when you look at what happened in Irondequoit with that team, that wasn't found because of regular testing of that team. That was found because they had cases with symptoms. So, we're really flying blind on that one. I just find it, the only word I can come up with is asinine. So, we'll allow this piece to go on, but we won't set up the systems to allow in-person instruction to happen. I think the key in the whole thing is getting smart about what testing we're doing.
So I've yet to talk to anybody who would disagree with what you just said. Anybody that I've engaged in that conversation, we wholeheartedly agree. Interesting, since last time we talked, New York State Department of Health, or no, I'm sorry, NICEAD released a document saying it is illegal to require testing for athletic participation, and there was one other item they said, because some districts tried to do it across New York State, and they said, no, you can't do it, you can't require it, and actually put a memo out to all districts that is, you can't make that as part of a prerequisite to participate. I don't disagree with you. You know that I reached out to our Department of Health. I wanted to do that here. And they reached out to New York State and they said, no, they're not, they can't use them for that reason.
Other questions or befuddlements? Milton.
So, Jamie, I know that the sports is a non-curricular thing, and so that's part of the reason and part of the rationale for allowing this to continue. Is there any consideration for other non-curricular activities that the school might either sponsor or host that would allow students to gather and without social distancing? I'm thinking about junior prom and ball and those kind of things.
So interesting you say that. Last week, all of the high school principals in Monroe County, and includes our high school principal, Mrs. Lowe, they did draft a letter to the governor together asking for permission to safely host things like proms and things like that outdoors with temperature screenings, masks, things like that. So they did draft a letter advocating for it. We've talked a little bit about hosting like an orchestra concert with each person in the orchestra could bring 2 people, kind of like athletics are allowed to do, or potentially even doing band and chorus in a controlled fashion. And similarly, I even told Mr. Shawman, I don't see why we couldn't do something for the musical to have a couple people per student in the audience, as long as we can control it properly. I think it's on the same exact plane, it's a level playing field with athletics. We're also talking about, no pun intended on that, but we're also talking about the sound, having the sound perform at football games, and how can that happen and do it safely? And so, no final decisions have been made, but we certainly are looking at ways to do these things so that kids can perform and have equal opportunity. We've had so for example, we had a request to host wrestling sectionals. We declined. And we've had a request to host a girls wrestling match meet, which we are looking at maybe doing. We have some female wrestlers here, and it's a quickly growing sport. And so it's a small enough number of folks that we are looking at doing something like that.
Other questions? Okay, thank you very much for the update. Do you have anything else?
That's all.
Is there anything else? Carlin, welcome.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thanks.
So there's not a lot, but I'm sure most of you heard, but our swimmers and skiers won both their sectionals. So it was a lot of fun. And Spin Blazak won the overall for skiing. And for our swimmers, we had a few people set new records for our school as a relay team and stuff. So that's really exciting news. Musical is officially practicing, which I said last time, but we're getting more into it, and that's exciting. Spoon River, the play, is being showed this weekend on the 26th, 27th, and 28th. The tickets for that are being sold this week. You can get those at the ticket booth at the school, and Sisson's selling those during lunch, or Mr. Shaman will be selling them, or you can look at CPP's Facebook page, and they have a Venmo set up there where you can buy tickets and get it that way, and they have all the info on how to watch it and access it there as well. The school currently right now is raising money for the Lymphoma Society too, so that's another thing that we're doing. And then our student government's looking at doing a school-wide scavenger hunt. We've done scavenger hunts at like conferences and stuff where you can break up in groups and it's safe and you're and like distance safely. So we're looking at that and working around some things so we can have an event that everyone in the school can participate in, which will be unique, but surely a lot of fun. And if we are allowed to soon, they're looking at a Powerpuff game because the sports have opened up. So they're looking at that as well. But other than that, we're doing all well. So.
Great. Thank you for the update. Let's see, we have warrant reviews. I'll ask Julianne and or Cheryl to motion, please. Julianne and Cheryl, questions or comments? All in favor? Opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you. And minutes up for approval. I'll ask for motions, please. Milton and Michelle, questions or comments? All in favor? Opposed? That carries unanimously too, Deb. Matt, are you introducing Caroline or are we jumping right to the chase?
I'll introduce her briefly. Good evening, everyone. So Caroline Chapman, our Director of Communications and Advisement, is here to engage us in a presentation about Brave Square, something we continue to interact with and use daily. So she's here to talk to us about the timeline, about how Brave Square came to be, some of its capacity, some metrics behind it, what we've experienced in its use thus far, and to talk to us about some next steps. So Caroline, whenever you're ready, take it away.
Thank you, and thanks for having me tonight. I have a few slides to share, and then we'll answer any questions that you have. Are you able to see everything that I have on my screen? Awesome.
Yes.
So this came about actually a year before we actually started rolling it out. So when we started looking at, when I took over this position, there were probably like 12 different places that I had to post information to, and we really were finding that people were seeing things on our Twitter feed, but we also had Facebook and the website, which gets some traction, but not always everyone goes there. And so working with Dan Bowman, our Director of Technology, I really felt like we needed to find an app that kind of helped put everything together. And so we discovered the company Parent Square, and we have been utilizing it actively since last April. So this would be a look at maybe what a family would be utilizing in before we adopted Brave Square. So different teacher at the kindergarten level using different tools and apps, and then their other child is in 3rd grade, and so now they've switched to these different apps to use. And then a child in middle school, now they're playing sports and other activities, and so they're getting remind texts. They're now engaging more in Schoology. And so one of the challenges we had was I had a teacher show me all the apps on their phone that they use just for the Canandaigua City School District from a parent perspective. And they had one of those little icons on their phone with all of them put together. And I was like, we got to figure out something better to do with this. I will admit that many of these apps are still used in some capacity, but we're not utilizing Infinite Campus Messenger anymore. And we're not calling on a different robocall system. And we're trying to have all K-2 teachers utilize Seesaw, and then 3 through 12 Schoology as a learning management system. And so thankfully, many of these things were in place before last March. So Dan discovered the app in June of 2019, and we worked with our technology committee to decide if this really did meet our needs. Once we figured that out, last February, we started training the pilot group. So people were signed up. We had a teacher at each grade level and then one per department, basically ready to roll it out. And they were ready to introduce it in March of 2020. So we were excited. We were going to like dip our toes in. And then the last day we came to school was March 12th. So we were, and Jamie said, well, you've got this app. Why don't we roll it out? And I was like, everything I read says, don't change communication systems in a pandemic. And so we talked about it, and we decided to change communication systems in a pandemic. And so ultimately in April, we did a training in 1 week span. Sue Friend and I trained everyone remotely. Each training only took about half an hour because the tool is pretty user friendly. And we focused on the main parts of the tool, which were posting and messages. And all the training was done through Zoom, and staff had a week to get their feet wet. And it was an expectation that everyone would start using it in April. Come September, they did unroll the new health screening app that we introduced that has been helpful as well. So just a few highlights of the tool, and then I'll show you some statistics about how we've been using it. So we really wanted to have obviously a secure location for our information where parents could customize how they receive information. So if parents are listening and teachers, it's a good reminder that you can customize how you receive your information. So if you want to receive it through email only, you can receive texts. Calls go out only when we send out emergency alert calls. And even that is an opt-in system. So if you only want to receive a text message, you only can. One drawback with that is you can only receive it on one phone number. Our previous system did allow for multiple phone numbers. It is all through Google single sign-on. The apps are user-friendly, and we get really good statistics and analytics. I know that 99% of our families right now are contactable through the app. So recently, if you utilize it, last week we asked people to update their information, and we got some phone number changes and email addresses. And so it really helps us to keep our information updated in Infinite Campus. It does link to Infinite Campus. It syncs every night at midnight. So when students change, like if they were to change a class or if they were to unenroll, everything syncs every night at midnight. So it's really useful to be connected to Infinite Campus. Some of the other great features, and many of these I look forward to using in more detail once we have our students back full time, is online permission slips. So we can collect parent signatures, and speaking from a teaching experience, collecting permission slips is not so fun. So it's really helpful to have that feature. Calendar information can be synced, and the program automatically sends out reminders to families. Photo sharing, that was definitely a qualification of picking a new app from our primary and elementary school teachers. One thing that's been really great is the secure document delivery. So we have utilized that to deliver report cards, the survey to return to school, and we get statistics and know who's opened it, and we know who hasn't opened it, and we have the ability to follow up with those people. There's the ability to sign up for conferences. That was used for parent conferences at the primary and elementary school level. They have the ability to set how long they are. You can put in a break. Maybe there's a time you want to start on 2 different days. Parents can sign up easily, and reminders automatically go out. There's newsletter templates that are available for people to quickly make something that looks and is user-friendly. And another great and a very important feature is that there are over 100 languages that the app translates into. So the user can set their language, or program managers can set the language for a family when they register, if they need to have it switched to their native language. And when a message is sent in English by a teacher, the family receives the message in their preferred language on the app. If a post is sent by the district, the post is received in the family's preferred language. If the family replies to the message, let's say in Spanish, it comes to the teacher in English. So it's been a really great tool, and it's been something that we really found that we needed for our students who are new at learning English. Additionally, they just announced in their next update that permission slips will also be able to be translated into Spanish, Mandarin Chinese, and Arabic automatically. So those are going to be some great features for all of our population to be able to engage with the communication tools. So we have about over 7,000 users. So when I send out a message to the whole district about something, it does go to about over 7,500 people. Since the data is actually since the switch over to the new school year, and so that was from June 29th last year. You can see the statistics. We have sent almost 300,000 direct messages through the app. We've had 162,000 health screenings completed. We have delivered almost 27,000 secure documents. And that means that they also have many of those things did not go in the mail. So we have saved on some postage there. Additionally, that number actually would be higher if we mailed things because of students who have multiple households. We've had teachers post to an entire class. So a post is when it goes to the whole class, a message is when it goes to an individual family. We've had almost 13,000 of those with 345 different authors. And every one of our athletics teams has a group set up. And so groups are used for those extracurricular activities in athletics. So we've had some heavy usage. At sometimes maybe you could argue too heavy of usage, that people have been inundated with messages, and we're really trying to be mindful of that, trying to be mindful that we want to make sure people are informed, but we also try to, streamline communication. So the schedule is set up so that something goes out, every Friday at 3 o'clock, and that it has a list of things that we're going to talk about, and trying to keep it as short as possible, despite the fact that we have usually a lot to say. So what's next? Again, just being mindful of that over communication. I actually hope after COVID that this app isn't used quite as much, that we have the ability to say, most communication should come directly from the students, classroom teachers, that they are going to be the person in the group that family should be interacting with the most, because they're working with their child the most. So hopefully that will be something that happens in the future. I keep advocating and working with the company for improvements to the app. Messages has some features we'd like to see, tweaked and changed. They added the health screening in response to COVID. They've made other changes to how we receive data. And so I really think that Parent Square is a really responsive company. And there's definitely some places for improvement, and we're aware of that. People want to customize, maybe they want to receive notifications just from classes and maybe not from all the groups. And so how to balance all that is really important. And then in the post-pandemic world, when we get there, the class signups, the sharing of pictures, the ability to put out a list of things you need for an event. And I once remember when I taught 7th grade, we collected bagels for a morning before the Jiva field trip, and we got like 75 bags of bagels. Well, we don't need all that. What we need is you to bring this, this, and this. And so parents can easily sign up for things. So there's a lot of great uses that it has, and we look forward to using it differently post-pandemic. So that's my spiel for today. Does anyone have any questions?
Cheryl.
So my question is this: when a student logs into Brave Square, then they have to log into Schoology to get their assignment. Is that how it works? Or
yeah, that's a great question.
Can they log right into Schoology and skip Brave Square?
So we're finding that students operate out of Schoology much more than they operate out of Brave Square. And so and that's a step that we're trying to work on, is how to make it more student friendly. I think when we have more class activities like sports teams and more messages going through that way, I think that students will be utilizing it more. But really, Brave Square is that communication hub, and Schoology is where the content's going to live. You're not going to have your assignments in Schoology, in Brave Square. You're going to see maybe your to-do list for the week that's sent out on Sunday, and you're going to send your teacher a message. One of the great things about the messages from a teacher perspective is that if you have 20 students, let's say, who didn't do assignment number 1, I can go through, check off the students' names, their parents, and send one mass Brave Square message with a blind copy. So everyone knows they didn't do assignment number 1, but I'm not going to Infinite Campus and copying back and forth every parent's email address and not sending it that way. Schoology just definitely has a messaging feature that some teachers are still utilizing, and that's where content lives. So we don't necessarily can't get rid of that as a messaging platform. And we've had that conversation, and that's something that we're continuing to find a balance between. But Brave Square is more that communication hub, and my practice is canceled, or I need to know what time something is. Schoology is like, this is where my assignments live.
And is that true with Seesaw also?
Yes, those would be the same. And so our Brave Square is open K-5, and we were the first district in the country to ask for that. And they said, why do you want to kindergartner to receive an email about their assignments. And the challenge that we found is that a lot of families our students are home with their grandparents, and the grandparents might not be they don't get our communications. And so if the student receives the communication, the grandparent can work with the student on opening the communication. So Brave Square was responsive and opened up communication K-5, but when they roll it out and they advertise it as more communication to middle school and high school students for students.
Thank you.
Julianne, did you have your hand up?
I didn't, but I was going to raise it. So you must have just been able to read my mind. Really, actually not a question, just a little bit of feedback and a compliment that as somebody who's dealing with Brave Square as a parent, I find it to be a tremendously user-friendly experience. And I find that the communication, I don't feel like it's over communication. Many of you know my kids came to the district a little bit late from another school where we got a lot more communication. I find it to be a perfectly reasonable amount, and it's very structured and clearly organized. And the fact that the posts live there means that you can go back and find things. If you remember there was a message, you didn't write it down, it's really easy to find it. You don't have to figure out where you put it in your email and start searching that way. And I found that teachers are using it in really creative ways, that, you know, kids are getting positive direct messages. You know, I see you're working really hard on your work and keeping up with your assignments, and using it, I think, in creative ways as well, recognizing that younger kids might be more inundated or more overwhelmed by all of those messages. So at least with, you know, my 8th grader at the middle school, the team is putting together that Sunday message. So they're getting one message with all the information in one place. And I find that that's really helpful. So I just want to say kudos to all of you. I know it was hard to implement during a pandemic, but so helpful in getting through the pandemic and getting through the process of hybrid also.
Thank you. And we did go back and forth, and we have structures in place that we try to keep in place. So the team at middle school, we were really conscientious to put that as a group communication. I think the search feature is something we should continue to want to show people, because that really is helpful, and you know that maybe who it came from, or you know what the topic was, and so you can really easily find information again. So thank you for that information, and those are just always good reminders for people to know that those features they're up there, and a lot of apps have them, but we also sometimes forget to use them.
Thanks, Julianne. Jen?
I'd like to echo Julianne on this. As you all know, I was not a fan of some of the other methods of communication we've had in the past because they confused me. It's not all that hard to confuse me, but boy, did they. This actually does not confuse me, which is amazing. I really think this is a tremendous step forward. And if I can encourage anything, let's see how much more we can put through Brave Square, because it is easy to find and easy to use. Tremendous, great work, giant kudos on this. It's taken my frustration level down several notches. Fantastic.
Thanks, Jen. And I think you bring up a good point that what the ultimate goal is to really streamline all communication through it. And so one barrier to that is when a teacher receives a message, and let's say they're sitting at their computer, they get the message maybe through email, they have to go to Brave Square to reply to it. And so we continue to try to figure out ways to contact, work with the company to figure out what is the best workflow and how can we improve this workflow. But the idea would be maybe instead of always having email up, it's always have Brave Square up. So there's a definite switch, and email's not going away, and there's definite things that operate through it. But with the parent communication, it's crucial, and you see the thread, and there's some of those threads may seem like they're texting, and so there's some element of teaching students digital citizenship and how to respond to people and what time to respond to people. Those are all elements that go into this application as well.
Megan?
So my question is, like right now, because I have almost a child in every school. the grades and the missing assignments and things like that, right now I look in Infinite Campus.
Mhm.
I know in Brave Square, you can find like if things are late or missing, but am I missing it, or is there going to be a setup at some point where their grades will update like they do in Infinite Campus? Because I find that to be very helpful as well.
Right. So that's something that's on the rollout as well.
Okay.
So something coming down the road is, so right now you basically all hit upon the three things we've got Schoology, Infinite Campus, and Brave Square. And so the content's going to live in Schoology, and the goal would be that you don't have to go check Infinite Campus for grades any longer, that the integration would be in Brave Square, and that would eliminate that another element of multiple places to check. So that is good feedback and something that is on the table to implement.
Great. Any other questions? John?
I know you brought this up before, but if possible, having that second phone number
Mhm.
put it in the system if they can do it. And the other thing is, I just hope teachers never forget that a nice handwritten note going home for an attaboy, attagirl, that they can put on the refrigerator. I know it's old fashioned sounding, but you can't put, Brave Square message on a refrigerator. It can't become part of a scrapbook or part of a reminder. There still needs to be a personal touch to everything that we do. And as efficient as this app is, it
Mhm.
eliminates that personal touch.
No, I 100% get that, John. I'm a big fan of writing supplies. I don't know if you knew that. So I do think, and I like that with my own children, that when you get a personal note. So hopefully, right now the challenge is we even have to quarantine paper. So hopefully we are back with many of those things in the future. I totally get that.
Milton?
So I have nothing negative to say about the product. I think it seems to work pretty well. So the question I have is, as part of the review, when we made this decision to go with Parent Square, privacy is obviously something that district is, and given what's happening locally here, we can kind of, assume that there are some privacy levels that we're concerned with. What happens to accounts after a child or your children are gone? Do you archive them? Do you still have access to go back in and look at like grade reports and all that stuff? Or what happens with those kind of elements? And then is there a cost will the cost continue? Are we paying a flat rate, or is this something that we might see escalate over time as we request more and more features and so forth?
No, great question. So as for the archiving, I'm not exactly sure what happens when someone, like your daughter, graduates, but I do know from my end, all of last year gets put into a folder that I can access in the future year. So everything is put into an archive so that you can easily access it. That being said, that's a question we need to determine. I know there's probably an answer to it. I don't know it off the top of my head, but before students vacate, we would want to have access to that, because report cards are there and secure information is there, along with things that, like John said, you might want to print before you are done, along those lines. And then your second question was, can you repeat it? Sorry.
So I guess three parts. So do you archive it? Privacy in terms of what do we know in terms of, does it meet a specific level of privacy? Did we test that? Is that something that we looked at primarily? And then secondly, thirdly was the cost issue. And is it does it escalate? Do we have a...
I'm sure the costs will go up, but right now they came as a flat rate. And then there's different parts of the feature that are add-ons. So I believe it was like an extra $1 per student to have the secure document feature added on. And so there's other things that we could add on, such as allowing for payments to happen through the application, such as allowing it to do our lunch. We are not charging for lunch right now, but when there were lunch balances, it can also do the attendance calls, which we're also not automating right now because of the hybrid system. So there are additional features that you can opt into to pay. But when I showed that picture at the beginning of all the different applications that we're using, we also are not paying for many of those now because of the adoption of this application. And so I think, while the cost might go up in the future, there's other ways that we are saving. As for the security, one of the other challenges that we are facing is, or things that have been rolled out during this time, is Ed Law 2D. And that law has required us to make sure that every piece of information that we have is protected. And Dan works a lot, and Tracy are working a lot on Ed Law 2D. And one part of that is we have to disclose the different locations in which we have student information. And so when we had people using Remind and other free apps, those were not compliant with Ed Law 2D. And so one of the other great reasons to adopt this is that this is compliant with Ed Law 2D.
Great, thank you. Anything else?
Thank you.
Great, thank you, Caroline. Let's see, we have the establishment of the 2021 Capital Reserve Fund. Jamie or Brian, did you want to introduce this in any way before I call for motions?
I would just say kind of what I shared earlier, that we should have probably started this capital reserve last year, but given that all the circumstances we were entering last year, and we had a number of different resolutions on the ballot, that we decided to hold off for a year. The hope would be that we would put ourselves in a situation where we're looking at capital upkeep every 5 or so years at a lower price tag than what we are right now with a $60 million project done in multiple phases, whereas this would put us in a position where every 5 years or so, we might be looking at a $10 to $15 million project. Things like roofs and things like that are coming up. That'll probably be the next thing, is, you know, our roofs will be beyond life expectancy, and they cost money. We have a lot of surface to cover. So this is just to start another capital reserve so that we're prepared for the next capital project. It's hard to even think about the next one. We're just starting on a pretty substantial one right now, but it's the prudent thing to do.
And I will ask for motions, please. Michelle and Megan, questions or comments? All in favor? Opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you very much. We have a consensus agenda and a supplemental. I'll ask for, oh, Deb, I'm sorry. Oh,
Sorry, it's a roll call.
sorry, I forgot to, I didn't note that. I apologize.
That's okay. Mrs. Burks? Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
Mrs. Petzik?
Yes.
Mrs. Personelli?
Yes.
Mr. Palomini?
Yes.
Dr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mrs. Grimm?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deb. Sorry about that. And let's see, consensus agenda and supplemental. I'll ask for motions, please. Jen and Cheryl, questions or comments? All in favor? Opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you. Let's see. Did CIE meet? Jen, or who will report out on that? Milton, please.
So just a brief report. I think everyone has seen the minutes. We had a mid-year report from Sarah Panika regarding the language. I forget now, it's LOTE, but what does the acronym stand for, Matt?
Languages other than English.
Thank you. So interesting enough, they shared with us some of the recommendations. One was actually a name change to consider from foreign language to world languages. This is consistent with other changes we're seeing even in higher education, where I think our department is now called modern languages. So again, trying to move away from the sense of foreign or an other language. So that was one draft recommendation. The second was to expand the program into K through 6, and to then start considering the curricular shifts that would need to occur if that were followed through. Third recommendation was to create an honors program for students who wish to take advantage of such opportunities. And then the fourth recommendation was an exploration of culminating a trip for juniors and seniors in that program. Those recommendations were discussed briefly, and then we had a report from Dr. McFarland, who gave us an update on something we talked a little earlier about in this meeting, computer science and K through 12 computing and digital literacy skills. So how did I do, Matt? Anything else to add?
Oh, that was perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Then Jen, COVID-19?
COVID-19 actually has not met the last couple of weeks. One, because of folks recovering from getting their second shot. And then this thing called February break that everybody had to do. I don't understand that. I missed my friends, and I'm happy to update the next time.
Great, thank you. Anything else from you, Jamie?
I'm all set. Oh, I feel like I should mention of the folks that are retiring on this board agenda, my math skills tells me that's 194 years of service that'll be retiring from this district. None of them are that old, but combined, that many years of service to the district. Pretty impressive. It's going to be hard to replace people with that kind of history here and skill, and we wish them well. It's bittersweet. We're happy for them, sad for losing them, but happy for the next chapter in their lives.
It's one of the things I missed most because of everything last year. It's such an incredible opportunity to have a director or principal present the person who's retiring, to have them in the room with us with some of their loved ones, and to sort of see the reflection that passes across their faces for the amount of time they have given to this district. And I always say, and I will say again, if you prefer to drive off into the future and not look back in your rearview mirror, we wish you all the best, and we thank you from the bottoms of our hearts. But if you'd like to call Canandaigua and our schools homes for the rest of your life, we warmly welcome you to do that. So thank you to everyone for your incredible service. We will deeply, deeply miss you. That's all for tonight. I will ask for a motion to adjourn. Michelle and Milton, thanks very much, everybody. Have a good night. Bye-bye.